We're good to go? Prior to our meeting tonight, we are going to deliver the oath of office to our newest board member so that we can seat him for the meeting. So, Rob, if you could stand and raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Robert Mansky,
I, Robert Mansky,
having been appointed to the school board of the Stevens Point Area Public School District,
having been appointed to the school board of the Stevens Point Area Public School District,
swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution
that I will support the Constitution
of the United States
of the United States
and the Constitution
and the Constitution
of the State of Wisconsin,
of the State of Wisconsin,
and will faithfully
and impartially
discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability.
so help me God.
Help me God.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. So we will move into item 1 with reference to public access to meetings. Due to the public health emergency and the need to limit gatherings, we are strongly encouraging members of the public to attend our school board meetings remotely. Our school board meetings are streamed as well as taped, and public is able to access those documents, our meetings remotely. Thank you. Moving into item 2, our roll call and verification of quorum.
Mr. Mansky.
Here.
Ms. Va.
Here.
Mr. Pope.
Here.
Ms. Portson.
Here.
Mr. Wade.
Here.
Ms. Scott.
Here.
Mr. Ebel.
Here.
Ms. Rano.
Here.
Ms. Erler.
Here.
All present and accounted for.
Thank you. We will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 4 are public comments. At the March 19th, 2020 special school board meeting, the Stevens Point Area Public School District passed a motion to suspend School Board Policy 0167.3 public participation at board meetings for the duration of the public health crisis. Members of the public may provide public comment pertaining only to specific items on the meeting agenda via email at comments@pointschools.net. And the format and information with respect to that can be found on the district website. To be considered by the school board, all public comments must be received at comments@pointschools.net no later than 6 p.m. of the Sunday evening immediately prior to the school board meeting. Moving into item 5, presentations. Our Student Senate Representative Report, Alexis Durkee.
Hi, everybody. So today for the student update, I have quite a bit. We're now on our 3rd week of the 2nd semester, and according to Mr. Vollendorf, we have about 200 more students back in the building, so it's really awesome to see a lot more of my fellow classmates. We'd like to give a congratulations to the following boy swimmers who competed last weekend in the WIA state swim meet, which was Cade Casey, Connor Pilger, Parker Soik, and Will Gargalack. They competed in the medley relay, 200 free, 500 free, and backstroke. And another congratulations to the following winter sports teams for winning conference championships. We had boys swimming, boys basketball, and boys hockey. The boys hockey team is playing in a sectional semifinal game tomorrow night at Chippewa Falls, and both the boys and girls basketball teams will begin the playoff within the next week. So we're wishing good luck to all. believe it or not, today was the first day of practice for the alternative fall seasons. For some, it starts today, and the first team to start is girls swimming. I'll be competing with the girls cross country team in a few weeks as well. I believe it begins March 15th. And it'll be really different this year, but it's really awesome to still be able to get that fall season in. Some other clubs and co-curricular activities are also in the process of starting. We have forensics, FCCLA, and socially distanced intramural cornhole. And then lastly, we have sophomores and juniors registering for classes for the next school year this coming week. And that's all I have for today.
Thank you, Alexis.
Mm-hmm.
We are moving into item B, which is the communication report. Sarah O'Donnell.
Hi, the communications dashboard is included in your board packet. We saw increases in social channel impressions, engagements, and links across all channels, with a slight uptick in followers on par with what we would expect to see during the winter months, specifically as folks kind of come on to see what we're doing with the weather. Last month, I did share that we would be reviewing our current communication practices relative to COVID-19 notifications. We did take a look at that. We reviewed kind of what we were doing compared to what districts were doing, compared to some feedback we were getting from stakeholders. And after actually a couple discussions, we decided that we're going to go ahead and keep the current notification systems in place. So folks will continue to receive just that general notification that we have had a positive case occur in the building, whether that was a staff member or a student, and the last date that individual was present at that facility. Looking ahead, 4K registration for the 21-22 school year will begin on February 22nd. This is an online registration process open to students in the district aged 4 or older on or before September 1st. Under current circumstances, we cannot hold open houses as we traditionally would, but I want to give a huge congratulations to the 4K sites. They put together some really nice open house pieces, so families can see some video. They can kind of meet the teachers, albeit in a virtual setting, to give families an idea of what site they might select that would work best for their family. Point of Discovery School will also kick off their enrollment campaign for students entering grades 6 through 11 in the upcoming school year. Again, we'll shift this to mostly virtual, although we will be offering some one-on-one opportunities for families to come in and meet both Mr. Lathrop and the staff there as well. Thank you.
Do any board members have any questions for Sarah tonight? Thanks, Sarah. We'll move into item C, which is our superintendent's report. Craig Gerlach.
Good evening. Also, congratulations down there to our newest board member, Rob Mansky. Rob works under UWSB Chancellor Gibson and as chief of staff, and will be filling this position through the April 22nd election. The operation status update, you'll see the color-coordinated paper that was put into your packet. The issue that we're still dealing with as it relates to this is McKinley. We had to close a classroom down in McKinley, I believe today or tomorrow is their first day back. So we really have had limited numbers of buildings or classrooms that we've had to close since they started. However, we did have an outbreak at McKinley. Our current rates as it relates to staff, we currently have 2 positive staff members with COVID-19, 6 quarantines, and students, we have 6 positive and 86 quarantine. If you take a look at where we're trending throughout the state, the county, and the school district compared to our last board meeting in January, per 100,000 people, we went down in Wisconsin from 46 to 21, so that's a significant decrease. We've gone down in Portage County from 37 to 26, again a significant decrease. And within our school district, we've gone from 39 to 27. So that is good news in terms of tracking being decreased related to COVID-19. Our current model is 4 days a week at the elementary, 2 days a week at the high school. In terms of the cohorts, that is what we started with at the beginning of the school year. Generally speaking, as it relates to performance, Our students that are in person aren't doing, the students that are in flexible e-learning aren't doing as well as the in-person. That's a trend across the state of Wisconsin. That's obviously getting a lot of conversation and comments as we speak tonight. There are several school districts having the same discussion as we are. First semester grades as it relates to secondary, we have a 19.9% failure rate with flexible learners, flexible e-learners, and an 8.5 failure rate with our blended students. So students that are coming to school at the secondary level 2 days a week are performing better. But we're finding the failure rate with the students that are in flexible learning is an issue of simply not being engaged. You know, the computer may go on, but they're not there. So I'm receiving more and more parents or concerns from parents in terms of when getting kids back in school, and I understand, and I have those same concerns. We're waiting on an update from guidelines from CDC that was supposed to be out today. I haven't seen them yet. Maybe tomorrow. I'm not sure what that's going to tell us. Our biggest issue with getting students back to school at the secondary level in our large schools is the social distancing component. And I understand there are districts that are going to school either 4 or 5 days a week. They aren't social distancing, and I think that message needs to be clear, and I'm not sure it is. Every district's doing things just a little bit different. That continues as a conference. I meet with our area superintendents every other week. We meet again Thursday. Ideally, we'd like to be doing the same thing. As neighboring schools, I think there's a presence of power with the same thought process. We aren't there. Every one of the Valley schools are doing something a little bit different. We'll continue to talk, we'll continue to monitor, and we're going to continue to move towards moving students back to school. As I stated at our last board meeting, I'd like to get kids back to school for fourth quarter. I'll say what Wausau's doing only because it was just on live at 5 o'clock. I'm not going to speak for my neighbors if I don't know if it's official. They voted 5-4, split vote, to go back to school 4 days a week at the secondary level, March 1st. There was a couple amendments to make it shorter, make it longer. So that is occurring. Other school districts in our conference are doing something that's different. I'm looking at getting students in the beginning of the fourth quarter. I'm not sure what's going to change. Last month, I was hoping the vaccination would be administered. We're not in control of that. We're in control of creating a plan, which we're doing. We will have a plan. We'll have a plan to vaccinate our staff in 1 day if the vaccination's available. We don't know when it will be available. It will be available, we just don't know when. We're working with our insurance broker, M3, we're working with Portage County, we're working with Aspirus, and we're working with Marshfield Clinic. So is every other school district. They're all trying to do the same thing. So we're creating plans. We're working with Kathy Reynolds as well, our school nurse, to create a plan which we will have in place. Creating the plan isn't the problem. It's having access to the vaccination, and that's completely out of our control. And I'm on the phone daily with people that are in control of that, to some extent, I should say. I met with the secondary principals last week to have a discussion what it'll look like, what are our barriers to bringing back students at our secondary level. I have a meeting with the Teachers Association. I have a meeting with our leadership team on Wednesday, and I have meetings scheduled for all of our secondary meetings in person next Wednesday. I'll be going to Ben Franklin, PJ's Spashed, and we're going to combine pods and CFC just because of the size of those particular buildings, we have a facility where we can socially distance. I just believe it's important that I get in front of staff and be able to have a dialogue in terms of what's this going to look like? What are our barriers to get our kids back in school? I guess that said, we do have a limited number of staffs that are vaccinated. Those are staff that work with students in terms of bodily fluids. But that is a really small number. I mean, you can count those on probably two hands. And so our message is, and the message is to all, if you got an opportunity to go get vaccinated, do so. But right now, and I'm not going to throw out numbers because I don't know what I could disclose, but I can tell you our clinics are backed up big time. And part of it's because there's duplicate scheduling. I know there are organizations that are contacting people that are 65 years and older and say, call everybody, make an appointment with everybody that you can. So it's bogging down the system, and that tells me then some of the numbers in terms of the backlog could be overinflated because you have people that have scheduled at various places. So you'll see what I see on TV. The vaccination administration of that is very cumbersome. It seems to be improving weekly, and it appears that Johnson & Johnson may have another variation out there. So we are scheduled for March 1st. When I say we, educators in general, people that work in the school systems. And of course, the county is working with Pfizer, which the second shot is 3 weeks. Moderna, the second shot is 4 weeks. So we do have spring break in there that we have to schedule around, because you don't want to have the shot. You have to coordinate with that. But we all see the same stuff on TV. I don't know what's accurate and what's not. But in Texas, there's a shortage of the second shot, and people are going beyond the 3 or 4 weeks before they're administered, and they're not getting the second shot. That complicates, I think, people getting the first shot. I'm far from an expert. I'm just reiterating what I'm hearing throughout the state with my colleagues as well as the medical people. So there'll be more on that. But I think earlier it was my hope that we could have our staff vaccinated, and we can justify getting back to school. We need to get back to school. I'm not sure the vaccination is going to be administered that swiftly for us. So we have to look at what other variables are in front of us that are going to prevent us in terms of the whole social distancing. There's research out of Harvard University that is talking about 3 feet of social distancing is appropriate for schools. I would like to see that get some legs. At the end of the day, we need to get kids back into school. When we do, if it's 6 feet of social distancing, I can tell you right now, we aren't going to be able to do that in many cases. And that is what it is up until now. So that's all I have. I'm going to continue to talk and learn. I think what we'll see is some of our neighboring schools will start going back to school. There is another school district, and again, I'm not going to mention names, that is attempting to do exactly what we're doing and focusing on the fourth quarter. I firmly believe, because this is going to linger into the summer. It just is, because we have remediation issues, and it could linger into the fall. We don't know that yet. If we don't have staff completely vaccinated, much less students, and I don't know if that'll even be the plan. But if we don't finish this year with our kids in school as normal as possible, I think it's going to be that much more difficult to start school next year and have everybody in there. So I can say, not a lot has changed since last month. We don't see a super spread in our schools with students. I think if we can take a look at our numbers with adults, we're not either. Yes, we have some students and adults that are getting COVID, but at a very minimal rate in comparison to, I think, what we feared at the beginning of the school year. We are, as Alexis mentioned, we are starting our alternate fall, spring season. And I think we'd all have to look at each other in the eye and say we're kidding ourselves if we think we're social distancing with athletics. Of course you're not. And we've had some issues, but very limited with athletics. It was a surprise to all of us that are monitoring that. So, that said, I'll field questions.
I do have a question.
Chris?
I have to. When does, we're shooting for fourth quarter start possibly. When is that?
April 4th.
Okay. The other question was, you mentioned the 19, did you say 19.9%? For the secondary?
I mentioned 19 point. We have a 19.9 failure rate for
Right.
students at the secondary level that are in flexible e-learning. Those are
Right.
the students that are at-home e-learning,
So-
and 8.5 for the blended model.
So what's happening with that? What are you doing with that 19 point? Or what is the administration, or what are you able to do with that?
Connie, are you with us?
Well, we are
Well, I
changing
could-
systems
I can
as
say-
of the beginning of the third quarter with secondary.
I can say right now what we're doing is, in terms of remediation, we're allowing students to retake, we're extending the semester for those that are failing, we're providing more opportunities to catch up. Did you pick up on that, Connie?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The numbers, that all reflects first semester, which we saw over the course of the semester that kids that were coming to the blended model, coming even if it was 2 days, were achieving at higher rates than the kids that weren't attending. And so that flexible e-learning model is not in place second semester. So more of our kids are back in our buildings, and what all of our buildings have done are offering credit recovery options.
Okay.
Extending the semester for students as an opportunity to complete some work for a passing grade. We're doing some after-school sessions for credit recovery. We're going to be offering extensive summer school for credit recovery. So
Okay.
really, we're trying to do whatever we can and be really flexible so that kids that struggled in that environment can enter next year without serious credit deficiencies.
Okay, great. Thank you, Connie.
You bet.
Is that 19.9%, is that students, like 1/5 of the students, or 1/5 of the grades given?
Good question.
The 19.9% were of those kids that chose the flexible e-learning. 19.9% of the students had an F.
So you could have a student with multiple Fs,
Yes.
Okay.
but that 19.9 just represents one student.
Okay.
Good question.
Thank you.
I have a question too. Do we have access to the secondary e-learners, their grades or their progress, since they are through the OLC for the second semester?
Within the OLC, we have currently 60 of local teachers that are teaching an extra online class through their Schoology. So those, and are you asking for parent access?
Well, I'm just because right now we have these stats. I'm sorry, hold on. He decided to barge in when I started talking. So because we have the stats from the last semester for the 19.9% and the 8.5, would we have access to that? Would we be able to get an update of what that would look like from the OLC students?
Absolutely.
Third quarter? So we would have
Yes.
access to that and we can take a look at that again.
Yes, we can get that. We will have same third quarter grade report, and we'll include that online learning center because we did have such an increase in the number of students that chose that this semester.
And do we know about how many students decided to sign up for the OLC?
It's roughly, and about 280 students that are currently choosing the online learning center, and that is in grades 7 through 12.
Thank you.
Do any other board members have any questions? Mike?
You had mentioned about the CDC guidance that you're waiting on. Are they putting out guidance that is specific to schools, or is it the public in general, or?
We understand that there's supposed to be additional guidance specifically for schools. My concern is, though, when you hear the conversation at more of the national level, and I think you include the CDC, the reference typically is going to those schools that aren't in session at all. Green Bay, Madison, Milwaukee, Chicago. We're in session. We just need to get in session more. So I don't know if, I'm not holding my breath that the guidelines are gonna be that helpful to those of us that are actually in school. We're just trying to figure out how to make it work for everybody. But short answer, yes. I don't know if you said this, Meg, but I know we had a disagreement wearing masks earlier before the meeting. Did you explain taking them off? For our guests that are here, the governor's mandate allows for those that are speaking on educational topics to remove their mask while they're speaking. You'll note I did have my mask off for a moment, then I put it back on, so we are following the guidelines. We typically say that at the beginning of every meeting.
I had one more question.
Sure.
I'm just curious, the 8.5% failure rate, not failure rate, but kids who received an F, they're in person. How does that compare with, say, a normal school year? Are we doing okay there?
Unmute.
Give you the Muppet thing.
It's a bit higher, but not significantly.
That's a very common throughout, when I say the state, my colleagues that I talk with.
Yeah.
Kids that are in school, even if it's 2 days, they're not failing at a rate that's much greater, and those that are not in school are really struggling. So we're not unlike most schools right now. But unacceptable, we can't have 8, we certainly don't want 19, we can't have 8% of our students failing. It's unacceptable. So we will continue to mitigate those issues, as Connie stated, to the extent that we can in terms of giving students other opportunities yet before the school's up. And we'll continue to monitor and bring forward information regarding getting back to school April 4th.
One other question about that,
Yep.
Craig.
Go ahead, Jake.
You said that the 19.9%, a lot of it was due to just absent students. Are we out there trying to find them, I would assume, and seeing what's going
Every
on?
one of our secondary schools are doing frequent home visits. So in addition to emails and phone calls, we're actually having some of our administrators and social workers and counselors are going to homes to just do whatever we can to engage kids.
I do just have a comment. So, first semester, my secondary students were exclusively doing e-learning from home. And I did notice that their grades were, no matter how much they were in front of their Chromebooks and keeping up and just making sure that they were working on assignments and being proactive in that, their grades were definitely slipping. All their teachers were amazing. They worked as best as they could with my students to try and get them up to grade and up to date. And it was really just, they're turning their assignments in, but there's just something else that is missing. So this semester we decided to put them in the blended model. And I have to say that their grades, they're definitely keeping up. So I agree that we have to do what we can do to get the kids back in school, because I think that is the missing component. And I personally feel like it's because they don't have their friends to turn to and be like, hey, did you understand what that assignment was about? And just having that face-to-face interaction with their peers or with their teachers. I felt like the first semester they struggled so much because they didn't really know who to turn to, because they're so used to a model where if they have a question, they can just kind of like linger a little behind after class and talk to teachers. But I really do just wanted to give a shout out to all the teachers that we have in the districts here. They've been doing such an amazing job just trying to catch up. And, you know, when I sent out emails, they were very responsive and on top of what they're doing. But I can see where those rates are coming from, because seeing it firsthand with my students, I'm like, hey, you know, this isn't like you, like, what can I do to support you? And that's just saying that I am able to be here to support. But then when we're looking at families that may not have, you know, an adult or a parent in the home to be able to support them, I can be in a meeting and they'll come up to me like, hey, I need help. And I gotta be like, give me 5 minutes before, you know, I can take a look at it. And then when there's things that I don't understand, it's like, you're gonna have to email your teacher because I don't understand what this means. I don't understand the context of this. So you're gonna have to take a lot more initiatives. And those are things that our students are not used to. But definitely I look forward to see what we can do for our students and for our teachers for the upcoming quarter.
Any other board members with questions? I guess I'd just like, could we get a little bit of an update? We're now like a month into the new system at the elementary level. Also, we have welcomed a number of students back into our buildings across grades. And I guess I'd just like an update as to how things are going with that,
Sure.
the new elementary system for kids and staff.
It took a couple weeks to get all of the bugs worked out, but overall, we're seeing really good engagement with our elementary families. Each teacher just had indicated there's a handful of kids that are struggling to keep engaged. The students that have been collapsed into the other classrooms, we've not seen a huge breakout of COVID or have had to send a lot of kids home due to being a close contact. So all in all, the biggest issue that we've had is bringing all 9 buildings together and figuring out how to get hands-on materials to and from home, because our e-learning teachers are not at the building that all of those kids may be at. So, but we've got that worked out now. Buildings and Grounds have done a tremendous job at helping us to figure that out. And a couple people here at Bliss are organizing stuff in the PDC for us too. So it's going well.
Great, great. Okay, thank you very much, Craig. We'll move into item 6, which is our consent agenda. On the consent agenda this evening are the minutes of the January 11th, 2021 school board meeting, the February 1st, 2021 special school board meeting, the approval of the schedule of monthly bills, and the employment recommendations. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Motion by Mike, do I have a second?
Second?
Oh, Judy, second by Judy. All those in favor, and I will have Carlin call the roll due to the bills.
Mr. Wade,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Ebel,
Yes.
Roll due to the bills.
Sorry, that's me.
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Porson,
Yes.
Ms. Rano, Ms. Va,
Yes.
Mr. Mansky,
Yes.
Ms. Erler.
Yes,
And that was 9-0. Motion passes.
thank you. Moving into item 7, business service. Oh, shoot, Mike. Go ahead.
You're welcome to do them if you
Nope,
want.
nope, you know what? You're here and go for it.
All right, well, our first item, 7A, is approval of the 2021-2022 student fees. And I believe Dr. Owens is here to explain those fee changes.
Yes, good evening. This is a part in the calendar development of the budget where we act as a conduit for the principals and bring forward the fees for the board to look at it. I can report that there are no change in fees recommended at the elementary level, and there are only a few all ones that are recommended at the secondary and summer school level. In your background, you have that full list. I can say I am not capable of answering the specifics as to what those fees increases are for. As I said, we act as a conduit for those. If there are specific questions, perhaps someone in Ed Services can respond, or if it's that important, we could bring that back to you at a subsequent board meeting.
Any questions of Tom?
Otherwise, I would just recommend approval of further recommendations.
Meg, I will move to approve the 2021-22 student fee schedule.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ebel. So motion by Wade, second by Ebel. Any questions or further discussion by board members?
I had a question, if, to have fees, to charge fees in your class, I assume there's a policy. Like, I mean, not anybody can just say, I want to charge. And I'm sorry if everybody else knows this, but what is the policy a case-by-case thing, or is it a general policy to be able to charge fees for your class?
Did you hear that, Tom?
I could not make out, I had the sound all the way up and I couldn't
I was
hear.
sorry about that.
The fee schedule, that is a working document. What determines, what would get, what would have a fee to it? The appropriateness of having a fee.
In the past, if there, go ahead.
It's gotta be a consumable item.
In the past, if they are looking at a particular course, usually comes up with adding a new course. And there's something that the students have to use, it's a disposable, a workbook or some type of activity like that. And then they will charge $1, $5, whatever, $10, which may be involved. That's usually the reason for some kind of a charge like that.
When we brought the fee schedule forward, I think last time, we made some adjustments. We eliminated, I believe, we reviewed that. But that schedule, it's a working document that has been around for a long time. And as Tom stated, if it is eligible or if it would be appropriate to have a fee, it would be when the administrator comes, either Connie in this case or John Vollendorf. They would explain what the new course is, and that's when they'd identify that there would be a fee.
Well, when I looked through this, I was thinking, I don't see many of the core required classes on here. So are we saying then that required classes don't charge fees? I mean,
Generally not. They tend to be more co-curricular. You know, for tech ed, for example, if you're taking a specific class, you would be purchasing a fee for lumber. But generally speaking, our core classes are.
And we provide the textbooks, the apps or the online software. So generally, there wouldn't be one for our core class, and they are more of the encore classes, but there might be in some cases. If it's a consumable item that gets disposed of at the end of the year.
Thank you.
Any other
Oh,
questions?
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, G.
I'm sorry to ask more than one question here.
No, go ahead.
The sports, the fees for sports at the end, near the bottom here?
No, they're not part of this. The fees for sports and those standardized things are unchanged. They are set.
Here they are. They're like, the one is $500, allowed $150 and $100 and on down. My question is, I know why they're charged, okay? But my question is, do we have any sense of the number of kids that otherwise would participate that don't simply because of the charge? I mean, is there any sense of that happening?
Our coaches and our counselors are pretty darn good at identifying who that particular student might be, and there's ways around that. We have various waivers, opportunities. We don't put kids in a situation that they can't participate because of financial reasons.
Yeah, I'd hate to see even one person. I know a lot of sports do fundraisers, and a lot of that money goes to these fees. And I know that I've known parents that have chucked in extra
Yep.
for somebody else. It's
We have-
just
we
a
have-
huge
We have
thing.
parents that write the fee for their child and increase it
Yeah,
for somebody that might not be able to afford it. So our coaches and our counselors are really good at figuring that out and getting together with the principal and
yeah.
providing for that.
Are these in line with other schools? I mean, obviously, we must be checking on that, I guess,
I think in general, our fees tend to be a little low.
really.
You know what? I don't know the answer to that, Tom. Are our fees in line with other schools?
Or, I haven't looked at the other schools. I do know that our fees have been set at those levels, I think, for at least a decade. I don't think they've changed since then. So I've got to believe that they are certainly reasonable, if not lower than many schools. And as the superintendent has said, we have apparatus, mechanisms in place where students who can't afford some of the fees can have those waived in economic circumstances. So in those cases, the fees are not a hindrance to them.
Are there any further questions with respect to the motion? And the motion again is to approve the 2021-2022 student fee schedule. Hearing none, all those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed with nay? Motion is approved.
And our next item, 7B, is the Building Budget Savings Incentive Program. And again, I'll turn that over to you, Dr. Owens, to explain that.
Thank you. In 2016, the school board adopted this program of a building budget savings incentive program. And just to do a very brief recap, the reason was we wanted to break the mold and get out of the old thinking of use it or lose it. We wanted to try to encourage more responsibility, if you will, in budgeting and accountability and making better use of taxpayer funds and making it stretch to meet the needs of the academic program. So the board agreed to set up this program that allowed unspent monies to be carried over from one year to the next in buildings to acquire needed capital equipment and technology. Well, in a number of years that we've done this now, in 5 years, the principals and the staff have done an absolutely outstanding job. They've been terrific stewards of the money, and they've done such a good job that I've been receiving comments from a principal, for example, that he uses the words, it's allowed us to be forward-thinking and proactive instead of reactive, and we can begin to anticipate more of our needs and try to meet those and budget for them over longer than a one-year period. And that said, there are still many things that they need to do and could be doing, and COVID has helped point that out. So what I'm recommending, since they've had a track record of several years now of being very responsible with this flexibility, I'm recommending that we allow this program to expand to include personal services, technology repairs and rentals. I think you can already identify how that's advantageous. Non-capital objects, small equipment, things like site components, and building components. And this flexibility would really allow them to be far more proactive and budget over longer than a one-year period. And just as the Director of Technology has to be consulted and secured approval to get some of the technology items, yeah, I believe the facility managers, facility and safety manager would need to be consulted if they wanted to do something with building components or site components. And so that would mean, like, for example, if they wanted to do something in a lab, put in some computers or do something with their money, they may have to put some electrical in the wall, some additional 110 outlets and things like that. Well, if you approve this tonight, they would have the flexibility to be able to use some of the money they carried over to accomplish that. So it kind of fills out the whole picture of being able to implement some new aspect of their educational plan in that particular building and give them that flexibility. Again, we monitor this as throughout the year and each year, and we provide reports to the staff as to what those totals are. And based on, as I said, 5 years of experience of working with this, these folks have done a fantastic job, and I, for one, would like to recommend this, give them a little even more flexibility within their own allocations. I should point that out. This is not new money. This is money the board has allocated, and there has been no increase in allocation for several years. The per pupil allocation has remained stable for several years now, probably 4 or 5. But it's just really good management at the building levels to make this stretch this money out. I just want to give them, I want to see them have the flexibility that they really need. Subject to your questions, I guess that's what I have.
Tom, would the principal of the building be the oversight person on the expenditures?
Yes, we also do oversight this at the business office as well.
Okay.
Mike Kurtz tracks this, and every year at June 30th, we run new totals and determine where they're at and provide them with a carryover. But the principals are responsible at each building level, yes.
And then they report back to business services with those numbers?
We determine those numbers at the end of each year based on their expenditures and in the amounts, and then we update the total carryover amount per building. We do, that's done every year.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
Tom, are there any restrictions on what they can buy with this money?
Yes, those categories I listed, of course, they've been able to do technology and capital equipment for 5 years. But now what I'm recommending is personal services. Those typically are the 310 objects, which would include, if they were going to do a lyceum or something like that, and they wanted to bring in a speaker, that comes out of their regular budget. But if they wanted to do something a little more involved, they could have more flexibility to do that. Technology repairs and rentals, obviously, that's an advantage because then they could aid with our technology needs if they so desire to get some repairs made. Maybe they need something done and the money's not there in the technology budget, but maybe the building has an extra 1,000 or 2 and they could pay for that. The same with rentals, maybe they needed to rent something. Excuse me. And the other example I mentioned would be like building components where they maybe would want to pay for the installation of electric outlets for use of technology or something. So they're restricted to those things.
Are there any further questions of Tom? Then I would be looking for a motion to approve the revision of the building budget savings incentive program by including personal services, property services, non-capital object, excluding resale, site components and building components accounts.
So moved.
Motion by Scott. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ebel. Any discussion or questions from board members? And all those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed with nay? The motion passes.
All right, the next item is 7C, approval of bus bid and acquisition. Tom, you're on a roll. You and Christian have some.
I will try to share my screen here. Can you see this document?
Yes.
Okay. This is the bid memo, and I'm going to scroll through and get to the bid results summary. We had 7 Type C buses, 72 passenger buses, and the Mid-State Truck had the bid on that. We had, out of the 3 vendors, we only had 2 bids come in, 2 bidders, and the only bid we had on this, however, was a very reasonable bid, was $713,300, less the trade-ins of 7 buses, brought us to $489,300. We had 1 Type C that was a 42 passenger bus. We had a couple of bids on that bus, but Mid-State Truck also came in low because of the trade-in value. They were at $75,950. And then we had a Type A bus, a minibus that loads between 25 to 29 passengers. That's a gasoline bus. And with the trade-in, Nelson's bus service was low on that at $52,825. These are the 72 passenger and the 42 passenger buses, I'll point out, are propane. The 72 passengers are propane, the 42 passengers are diesel. And then the Type A is a gasoline powered bus. So anyway, the bids came in as such. We currently have a consideration of an interest rate of 2.28. We're going to look to see if we can find something a little lower than that. But notwithstanding that, our recommendation is to take the 2 low bids from Mid-State Truck as listed here, $489,003 net, and the 75,950 net, and then with the Nelson's bus service, the Type A at $52,825, and that is stated here in the recommendation. I've also put in here wording that we always take these out on a 6-year lease period and do annual payments. They're expected to be no more than $110,000 a year, and of course, if we can do any amounts lower than that, that would be allowed by this motion. So that's our recommendation.
Are there any questions for Tom? I guess I have one question, Tom, and I may be misremembering, but I believe last year was the first year that we started buying the buses, the propane buses, and
That is correct.
And I'm just, I guess, I'm assuming that's gone well, and so are we looking to continue to move in that direction? And I guess if you can just remind me again of what the benefits are of propane versus the other options.
There's 2 parts to your question. That's kind of like the performance and how they've been going. And then the other main section is that what's our plan our plan is to replace, probably with this round, next year we'll do diesel. We can't run all propane because of the limitation on distance. For example, we need diesel buses that can travel greater distances, refuel and come back. The infrastructure's not in place where we can reliably send a bus to Madison or Milwaukee and somehow find LP at exactly where we need it and then come back. So we still need diesels to run. I'm going to ask Chris to come online here, Chris Budzinski, and talk about the advantages that we found with the starting and some of the operations involved with the propane.
Right. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep, you got a little bit of an echo.
And that's because let's see, we will go to,
That's better now.
Okay.
yeah, I was going through the phone, for some reason my computer wasn't working. So yeah, propane buses, our biggest reason we went to propane was just over the life of the vehicle, you have much less cost in maintenance. Diesel buses, you have essentially the diesel exhaust system with the CAFE standards coming down the pipe, probably out in 27, that they're just tightening the restrictions on diesel fuel. We don't have to plug in diesels on a cold morning, well, on any morning for that matter. Generally, you aren't going to freeze them up like we're dreading the next couple of mornings of diesel that we can make it through. And then just the big part is the no emissions on propane versus now our clean diesels are really good, but they're going away from diesel. It's nice to have that essentially diversity in your fleet as well. But the biggest is just the cost over the life that is less on a propane bus versus a diesel bus.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Does anybody else have any questions for Tom or Chris? All right, then we'll be looking for a motion to approve the purchase of 7 Type C 72 passenger buses and 1 Type C 42 passenger bus from Mid-State Truck Service for $565,250 and 1 Type A bus from Nelson's Bus Service for $52,825. The total cost of all the buses is to be paid by lease over a 6-year period in annual payments, which are expected to be not more than $110,000 per year. Modifications to the bid or interest amount that lower any of these amounts are allowed. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Ebel. Do I have a second?
Second?
Second by Wade. Any questions or discussion by board members?
I see the word lease in there. Do we own these buses at the end of this 6 or 7 year period? Or are we leasing them? We go back.
Tom G has asked, he notes that we're leasing the buses. He's asking at the end of the 7 years or whether we own the buses. Do you want to provide input on that?
Yes, at the end of the lease, we own the bus. We own the buses that are part of that lease. We do that on a rotating basis. Each year, we come up with buses that we own, and at the end, we can run them for another year or two, or we can peel some of them off and include them in a bid for trade-in. Typically, we run them 7 to 8 years. We like to trade them in at the end of the lease or the next year to get the most we can out of the resale so that we can maximize our investment that way. But that's one of the things we look at, is to always try to figure out how we can stretch a bus a little bit more without having it go downhill too fast, and then there's not much money left in it for trade-in.
Any further discussion or questions from board members? Hearing none. All those in favor with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? The motion passes.
The next item is one we look at each month, 7D, the referendum progress report. Tom and Mike, would you like to speak to it?
Thank you, Mike. If you look on the screen then, I've got this information up. The total amount paid to date is 45.7 million. Contracts issued to date are 63.3 million. And contract balance is 17.5 million. We show this data in two different methods because they each tell a little bit of a different story. The column for paid to date, of course, is the same, right here is the same on both models. Table B is the other model. Mike brought up an interesting question to me, which I think is very helpful, and I want to point this out tonight because it was a great question. We work with this data all the time, so sometimes we don't think of it. But if you look over here, technology district-wide, it says 4.789 million. And if you look at the far right, it says paid to date 14 million. So you go, well, if we have a budget of 4.7, are we over budget there, or what's exactly going on? And the answer is that the payment to Nexus is in that amount. And I'll come back to this table, but if you look at table B, you'll see district-wide and Nexus, these two amounts here, the 3.5 million and the 10.5, total exactly this amount right here. So it's comprised of the Nexus payment and the other district-wide payments, including technology. What happens in this model here is when these budget numbers are put together by Nexus, their cost is embedded within every single item that they did. They call them bins. But so when we go to pay Nexus, some of these items we can apportion out to the buildings, but a large portion of it we can't differentiate the charge. So let's say it's maybe an engineering cost or something that affects several buildings, or it's a design that affects several buildings. So we can't apportion that out. So on this model, it gets put in here under district-wide, but in this particular model, it is parsed out so that the money that's just district-wide and technology is shown, and the part that's for payments to Nexus are shown here. And of course, the totals are the same. So that was a great question, and this is one way you can use the two models and look at one against the other. So this is just an informational thing, but of course, Mike or I would be happy to take any question that you might have.
Are there any questions of Dr. Owens on the referendum project report? Thanks, Tom.
You're welcome.
And then the last item, 7E, are financial statements. This is for information only. Mr. Kurtz, would you like to talk about our financials for December?
Good evening. I just have a few comments. The financials are through December. One of the things that you might notice on this month when you look at our balance sheet is you'll see that Fund 60 actually has a balance of 0. And Fund 60 have a balance of 0 because our activity accounts were housed in that fund. But due to accounting changes in accounting parts that we GAFI's Statement 84, we had to move our student activity accounts out of Fund 60 and into Fund 21. We had a goal to get that done by the end of December, and thanks to hard work of our secretaries, our school principals, and some other people, we were able to do that. And so now, moving forward, you're going to see that in Fund 60, we no longer have a balance in there because those accounts just aren't there anymore. But those funds still are there. They're in Fund 21. Any questions on that?
board members have any questions of Mike with respect to the monthly statements? Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, we will move into item 12, which is policy and legislation, Neola policy updates report. This item is on for information to board members for our newest board member and also for G, probably. The district embarked about 4 years ago, we contracted with Neola. Neola is a service provider. They review, they have contracts with most of the school districts in the state of Wisconsin. They review updates to policies at the state level and then make recommendations to local districts for the changes that either were required by law to make or that are items that we can consider making to our existing policies. Prior to that, we were doing it internal with the district, and the reality is we just hadn't done it for a long time. We would amend a policy as we needed, but many of our policies had really never been reviewed and looked at. Oftentimes they're just terminology changes. A position changes at the state, or there's a statutory change or addition thereto. And we also, with our district, we're running into situations where our state legislature is very fond of adopting new legislation that requires us to create new policies. And oftentimes there was no person at the district that had the expertise to be able to create those policies, or it kind of like Tom was saying earlier, it fit in maybe 3 or 4 buckets, and so there was no one person, and it would often fall to Carlin's position to work on that. So with Neola, we received these updates. We went through the entire policies. It was about a 1.5 to 2-year process. Thank God for Dan Contos, who was the chair of the committee at the time and kept everyone on task and did a wonderful job with that. And so we amended all of our policies, adopted Neola's system, and now we're working with Neola with respect to the updates. The reality is, we've had a change with Carlin's predecessor left. Carlin has come in. We've been dealing with COVID throughout the course of this year, and Carlin noticed pretty quickly that we have a number of proposed amendments that we've received from Neola that we just haven't gotten to yet. Typically, if we were having committee meetings, we would be in a situation where the board would have a first read of a policy at the week of the committee meeting. So the committee would be discussed, there'd be questions, there'd be suggestions for changes or amendments or whatever, and the committee would make the decision as to whether it was going to move forward to the board or stay at the committee level or go back to administration to be, changed. Right now, we don't have that. So we would have policies coming directly to us. And so we wanted to, just make a suggestion to the board, and we're looking for input from you. But the idea would be that right now during COVID, when we don't have committee meetings, we would be looking to provide the board with those recommended policy changes probably a month before. And we'd give you what Neola has provided. We have a little bit of a backlog that we'd have to work through right now. But the idea is we'd get those policies out to you with the recommended changes the month before the board meeting, give you that time to be able to take a look through those policies and connect with Craig or myself with respect to any questions, concerns, thoughts. And then we would have the board then review and potentially adopt those revised policies at that next board meeting. Of course, if the board at that meeting, wanted further discussion on it or wanted proposed changes, as, has happened in the past, then we would just wait to have that policy adopted the next month. Right now, it's a matter of both getting us back on track so that we get this system created, because we did the whole revision with Neola, we just never came up with a system to ongoing do the revisions. I will note that the board, when we did all the revisions to the policy, gave direction to administration that if the changes requested by Neola were minor, again, if it was an additional statutory reference, or if it was a change in a position, or maybe a misspelled word, or, again, a very minor terminology change, that administration would have the authority to make those changes. And so the idea would be that probably between Carlin and myself and Craig, we would take a look through and determine which of those policies administration can just go ahead and change, and then which of those policies have the substantive changes that we should be bringing forward to the board. So we wanted to lay that out for all of you and get some input from you as to whether you're comfortable with that moving forward, at least during the time of the pandemic, when we're not having committee meetings.
Sounds fine.
The change actually was going to be when we eliminated policy week and we created a new policy or a new committee structure.
Yep.
And policies that dealt with HR, finance would go to that committee.
Right.
And policy regarding educational issues would go to the ed
Services.
educational services, and then COVID hit. And so and committees ended up. I will say, however, there aren't any, and so we've got a handful of policies yet from the completion of actually probably Dan Contos's work. I can say that the issues that are lingering out there there's not a conflict as it relates to state law, for example. If there was to be something that obviously we need to act on for a legal reason, we would have brought that forward. And hopefully we'll work through this soon and continue with the updates, because we don't ever want to have to do what we went through
Again.
in the past.
Do any board members have any questions or concerns about that? And of course, we can try it, and if it's not working, or we've come up with something that we can make it work smoother, we'll go ahead and make those changes. Rob?
What's the annual cost for the service for Neola?
I can get that to you tomorrow.
That's fine, yeah. Just that was more of a curiosity, I guess.
I'd be guessing.
Yeah.
Worth every penny.
I assumed that was the case. I
want to
just
say 12, 15,000 sticks in
okay,
my mind,
okay.
but I'll get that exact
Yeah, that's
number.
fine.
Now, is that likely to happen in the next month, that you're gonna bring those policies that you determine need to come to the board?
I think it's probably we'll probably start next month. Just, it's going to take a little bit of time. I think we've got, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 packets that had been presented. And some of them are a handful, but some of them, there are quite a number of them. So I think it's going to take us probably this next month just to go through those and again, figure out which ones we want the board to substantively address. And, then we're going to parcel those out over time. We're not going to, give you 30 policies at a board meeting to try to figure out. We'll schedule it so that we're just doing it in doable doses.
So they're not time sensitive?
No. And if there's anything that's time sensitive, we'll be bringing it to the board. Yes. Any other questions or comments? Okay. We'll move into item 13, which is our meeting dates, times. And I want to note, we are tentatively scheduling a school board workshop for February 22nd at 6:30 PM. As people remember, we have, we're working with Lindsay Bernhagen from the university to provide equity and diversity training to all of our staff. Our staff have all experienced her first module, and we would like to have the board experience that first module as well. Moving forward, it's about an hour-long interactive presentation and interaction with the board. So I guess, is there any board member, because we would really love to have all board members do this. Is there anyone right now who knows of a conflict or would not be able to be here on the 22nd?
Will it be, we can do it virtually?
Yes, board members will be able to do it in person or virtually, as we've been doing with our board meetings. Okay, so we will go ahead and get that scheduled, and then we will have our regular March 8th school board meeting. Those are the next two coming up. With that, I need a motion to enter into closed session. And that is a motion under 1985 paren 1 paren C and paren 1 paren E, and 1985 paren 1 paren E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session, specifically to discuss bargaining strategies and parameters for negotiations with SPAEA and Teamsters. Could I have a motion?
Move to go into closed.
Okay, motion by Evil, a second by Mansky.
Second.
And I will have Carlin call the roll.
Mr. Wade,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Mr. Ebel,
Yes.
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Portson, Ms. Reno, Ms. Va,
Yes.
Mr. Mansky,
Yes.
Ms. Erler.
Yes.
9-0, motion passes.
Okay,